Well, hello again, everybody. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by 101 CBD, because when you're looking for full spectrum of raw CBD oil products, they've got you covered. Now, they have the Boost Tincture Blend, which is going to help with overall energy and mental sharpness. They also have the Chill X Blend, which is going to help with the relaxation and improve the quality of sleep that we get at night. And they also have the Alleviate X, which helps with inflammation and pain relief. And all of these tinctures come in their award-winning blueberry flavor. Now, I also want to tell you about their Raw Relief Topical, which now comes in a roll-on applicator, which means you can apply it directly on those sore joints and muscles. And right now, you can get the travel size roll-on for just $7 when you sign up for the CBD monthly subscription of the roll-on. So go over to 101cbd.org, order yourself some raw CBD oil today. And don't forget to use coupon code IMGS25 to get 25% off of that order. Now I want to talk a little bit about Green Code digital marketing. Because if you have a cannabis brand or business, you know your digital presence is an important part of marketing today. And if you're doing it yourself, it takes a lot of time away from you focusing on your business. That's why you need to talk to the professionals at Green Code Digital Marketing, because they can help optimize your website and digital presence for the highest visibility. So go over to greencode.website to see how they can help you build your brand. Okay, now let's start the show. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, cats and kittens, welcome back. This is the In My Grow Show, the podcast dedicated to taking the mystery out of cannabis. Once again, I'm your host, Alex, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to me. I truly do appreciate that. Now, here in a little bit, I'm going to play a conversation that I recorded with Sara Rotman. She was cool enough to take some time to come back on the show. Now, because that conversation is almost an hour long, today's show is going to be a little different. I'm going to do just a really quick strain review because there is a bit of a correction in there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I know about PGRs, which is plant growth regulators. But before that, I want to give a little bit of an update about something that happened here locally. So last week we did have that supervisors meeting about hemp farming here in Ventura County. And sad to say that they did vote against hemp farmers and farming in general. They voted alongside with the residents of that community, which really sucks because that vote is really going to put a finer line between the farmers and the residents in that community, because there will be litigation. The farmers are going to sue in order to be able to farm, in order to be able to, live off their land. But that also means that in the meantime, nobody's farming, no jobs are being created. It's just a bad thing all the way around. And I want to read a statement that Justin Benton sent me just after the vote that happened. It says here, it was lose-lose. Homeowners and farmers left pissed. They're extending the most restrictive buffer in the county for up to 10.5 months. There is a possibility that they come up with a permanent compromise in the next 3 months or so, but farmers are losing half of their land and investors are pulling out. Ventura County screwed itself again. We'll keep fighting the good fight, but we are not going to be Hemp Valley on this trajectory. Other counties will reap the rewards, and Ventura County will continue not to grow. Yeah, as I was saying, that's stunning. The county is going harder against hemp than they do against cannabis. I mean, cannabis, you only need to be 1,000 feet away from any place where kids congregate. The county is going a half a mile from, sounds like, any building that isn't associated with the farm itself. So that's, there you go. Ventura County will not be farming hemp anytime soon, or at least not in any big way. Now, if you're really interested, there is a link in the show notes for the video of that supervisors meeting. If you fast forward to the time marker of 5 hours and 47 minutes, that's where the conversation about hemp starts. And you're able to see all of the residents in there that are dressed in red. You'll see Justin up there, talking about hemp and hemp farming, Yeah, it's a shame. All right, now I want to move on to the strain of the week because there is a bit of a correction this week. Last time I spoke about the Garanimals. And that was a bullshit review. I got my notes mixed up. Okay, so here's what happened. So a few weeks ago, about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I picked up a gram of the Garanimals, the Time Wreck, and the Orange Skittles. And I rolled a joint with each of them, and I smoked them at different times. And every time I'd smoke one, I'd take my notes about, what it looked like, what it tasted like, how it smoked, how it made me feel. And when I'm ready to pull the review together, I'd go on the internet and get, details like what kind of cross is it? Is it a hybrid? Just different things. And I like to compare to see where I'm at as far as like the description of the taste and the smell. And I couldn't get why I was so off with the Garanimals, right? Because to me, what I wrote down was I got this really citrusy, really lemony flavor. And, the internet said there was like vanilla in it that I didn't get. Well, it turns out, I put my notes about the orange Skittles underneath the Garanimals, and that's why it didn't make sense. So, as I was saying, that whole Garanimals review, throw it out the window, not any good. I will come back at a later date and do a whole proper review of the Garanimals, but I'll be honest with you, I wasn't that impressed with it. But, we'll get back to it. We don't have to talk about that today. What I do want to talk about today is the orange Skittles. Now that's the one that has that, lemon air freshener smell to it. And the internet says that it is a sativa dominant hybrid of 60-40. Now depending on which website I went to, it is either a cross between the California orange and the Skittles or the Agent Orange and the Skittles. Now I don't know if the California orange and the Agent Orange are the same strain, just with different names, because that does happen. Because some strains will become well-known under one name and somebody will give it another name. Anyways, that happens. So either way, it is a cross of some kind of orange and the Skittles. That's why it is the orange Skittles. Now, this flower truly does have a citrusy smell. But the taste is like beyond orange. It's like a synthetic orange. It's like a fake orange. A little sweet at the end. Yeah, but you can't get away from that really surprising, really pungent, like lemon, citrus, orange flavor and smell to it. And on the exhale, it has this like sugary, almost candy-like flavor. At least it did to me anyways. Now the high was great because it was this like totally relaxing, euphoric, happy high. Now when I say relaxing, I mean that like after 3 hits, I felt the tension just kind of melt away from my shoulders, because that's where I carry my tension, is in my shoulders. People carry it in different places. Some people carry it in their middle back. Other people carry it in their feet. But for me, after like 2 or 3 hits, that tension just melted away. It was awesome. And that feeling of melting away probably had something to do with the fact that it came in at a nice, strong 24% THC, which was great for me because that means it was a great party weed for me. Not so much a working kind of grass, If I wanted to do any work on this, I think it's like maybe 2 hits from a bowl and that's it, and got to put it down, because anything more than 2 hits from this, and it's not so much that I'm useless at doing the work, but I'm not very crisp and way too distracted easily. So long story short, basically don't try to do a bunch of work when you're having fun with this orange Skittles. And if you see it out there, great bud, pick it up. But there is one thing I gotta mention. One thing that really stood out about this flower was like how tight it was. It really did look like a flower that was grown with PGRs, with plant growth regulators. And I'm always really suspicious of bud that looks that tight. Now you ask, what are plant growth regulators? Well, okay, so plant growth regulators are just that. They're hormones in plants that happen naturally, and these regulators, they're in charge of seed germination, root growth, stem elongation, leaves, and, just how and when a plant starts to flower. And these hormones are naturally occurring. They occur in the plant kingdom just as easily as growth hormones occur in the animal kingdom. Different hormones in our bodies tell us to, start growing hair at puberty, things like that. Now, the problem starts when growers will use PGRs that are chemically derived, or they're made synthetically. Now, if you've never seen bud or flower that's grown with PGRs, the buds are really tight, really dense, and hard compared to like flower or cannabis flower that isn't grown with these. That PGR weed just doesn't look fluffy the way other cannabis flower does. PGR weed also, it doesn't have that variation in different colors of greens and maybe some oranges or red hairs. A lot of the time it's either like this all around brown or reddish orange color, but the whole thing around it. Another way that I can tell when PGRs are used is that when I break up the bud, it breaks up differently. So PGR weed will, since it's really hard, it almost turns into dust when you break it up. Whereas other cannabis flower, when you break it up by hand, when you don't use a grinder or some scissors, when you break it up by hand, it comes apart like in the little flowerets and little tinier buds. Where a PGR doesn't, it just kind of falls apart into dust. It's really annoying. Now, as I was saying, there are two types of PGRs. There are the kind that occur naturally. Kelp is a well-known natural occurring PGR. Chitosan is also a well-known natural one. And that comes from chitin, which is really abundant in earthworm castings. The other one is tricantanol. Those are some pretty well-known, natural plant growth regulators that growers use. Now, the real problem comes with chemically derived PGRs because they've been known to cause cancer, infertility, poison the liver, and the majority of them, if not all of them, are classified as environmental pollutants. In the 1980s, the Environmental Protection Agency banned the use of several PGRs because it was estimated that the exposure to these could result in cancer risks 240 times greater than considered acceptable by the EPA. And it's important to know that PGRs were made illegal for the food industry. Some of the known cancer-causing PGRs that are chemically derived are chlormequat chloride, I think I'm pronouncing that right, diminazide, paclobutrazole, and uniconazole. Now, I don't want to give the impression that, growers use these things intentionally, because a lot of times, a lot of commercially available fertilizers will have some of these PGRs in them, and the grower, the cultivator, doesn't know. And unfortunately, here in California anyways, labeling on flower that I've seen in legal shops doesn't really require ingredients list of all the things that are used to grow that cannabis. At least not to the extent that I've seen in products that come out of Colorado. And me personally, I think it's one of those things that if you're going into a legal cannabis shop here in California, I think it's one of those things that your bud tender should be knowledgeable about. Is, does the cultivator use PGRs? Are they chemically derived? And that's just a short list about what I know about PGRs, about plant growth regulators. There is a link in the show notes to Humboldt Seed. They have a really great article up there, and they really break down the science about PGRs. So if you're really interested, go over there and check that out. Now, up next, I'm going to play a conversation that I had with Sara Rotman, who is the owner of Busy Bee Organic Farms. I invited her back to update us on how hard is it still to be a cannabis farmer in California in a legal market 4 years after it's been voted as recreational and legal for adult use. She was nice enough to take some time out of her busy schedule to get on the phone with me and have this really long, interesting conversation with me yet again. So do me a favor, everybody, hang tight, don't go anywhere. I'm going to play a little bit of music, and then I'm going to put that on for you. Well, everyone, check it out. With me again on the show is Sara Rotman, who is the owner of Bluebird Farms, which is a legal cannabis farm in Santa Barbara County in California. Sara, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm actually going to correct on the legal name of the farm. The farm is Busy Bees Organics, and our brand name is Bluebird 805, but we just have to change it to Well Founded. So we could talk about that in a minute, but
oh, sure.
Definitely want to give Busy Bees a shout out because that's our licensed name.
Absolutely.
So.
Speaking of which, so last time you were on was a little over a year ago. And
wow, has it been that long? That's crazy.
I was looking back, I was like, wow, this is almost a year ago. I mean, it's a little over a year ago, actually.
Yep.
And so
okay.
I'm wondering, how much has changed? Has it gotten any easier to cultivate cannabis legally in Santa Barbara County?
Oh, that's such a tough question. The short answer is not yet. Uh, I guess not yet would be the answer. We're, you know, sort of sadly in a very similar place. I think last time we spoke, we were talking a lot about the hoop house ordinance, and that did come to a reasonably favorable conclusion. What's interesting is now what's happening is all legal cannabis in the county is being challenged by a few vocal, but very, very persuasive and very noisy NIMBYs. It's definitely the minority, but they are, making a lot of noise and putting a lot of pressure on our elected officials. And I think the challenge is that they're conflating a lot of illegal activity and lack of information or bad information and fear with the activities of the legal community. And I think that that's hard for all of us. And so we are unfortunately in a very similar position in terms of trying to be, not just trying to be compliant statewide. That's sadly easier, but in the county, it's been such a moving target that it's actually harder to be operating as a legally compliant farm here in the county at this moment. But our sincere hope is that it's going to continue to improve, through advocacy and education, which is obviously something that we're deeply committed to.
Yeah, education is turning out to be the really big thing for the community. I mean, well, for people who aren't in the cannabis industry, just for the
For
community
sure.
at large.
No, for sure. For community at large. Yeah, absolutely. I think again, when there's a lack of information, it's easy to fill that void with bad information or with fear-based information. And so I think we all have a responsibility to provide truthful, scientifically grounded, good information to people who are genuinely curious or a little bit frightened or unsure of what this industry could bring to their community. And I think if we don't fill that vacuum with good information and science-based information, it will be filled with bad information, and that just makes our job harder.
Hey, so I want to take you back a little bit to last year. So one of the big issues with last year was the hoop houses, which are temporary structures that farmers use for a lot of different reasons.
Yep.
Now, so how did that end up being resolved? What did the county end up accepting?
So the county did find that they were agricultural structures and placed limitations on their use near blue line streams, rivers, and waterways, as well as in, for example, in our area, the Santa Ynez Community Plan, which has a thing called the design overlay, which is an aesthetic requirement in what they consider the large view corridors. So farmers that are operating in those areas need to obtain a land use permit in order to have hoops. And also, I believe there's certain setbacks from creeks and blue line creeks and protected waterways. So, but at least there is a path to legally operating with hoops. I mean, again, it became a bit of a de facto fight about cannabis, but thankfully we were able to at least get through that process, and hopefully those of us who are in the queue, so to speak, can get through our land use and CUP processes, in the next year or two, although it seems to be slowing down.
So that hoop house regulation is across the board for whatever crops then? It's not.
That is correct.
Oh,
yep.
Well, good. I mean, kind of good. At least we're not singled out.
No, we weren't singled out in the ordinance, which was really good news, and to be treated in synchronicity with the rest of ag was really great. However, during that whole debate, we were very much singled out, and interestingly, a lot of bad information is still, we have a bad information hangover from that. I was speaking with a member of the county staff the other day who has an access to the list of exactly how many acres are proposed for cultivation of cannabis in the county, as well as presumably what's being actually produced now under hoops with other crops. Cannabis has less, in the Santa Ynez Valley anyway, it's I think at the moment, and definitely for all you listeners out there, double check with the county on this, but I believe it's around 200 acres of proposed or existing cultivation. So that's the maximum we could have under hoops. We have more than 20,000 under different crops. And so, but it's still the perception that cannabis is this sort of big hoop requirement blight on the community. And so again, you just sort of see this bad information yielding, I guess, irrational fears or assumptions. If we're less than 10% of the hoops, how come we're the ones being called out as this big hoop thing? And by the way, hoops are really, really helpful for ag. So I bristle a little bit at people who condemn hoops.
People who condemn hoops seems like doing it like we're talking about, just mostly because they want something to push against cannabis with. Because I mean, if you understand the science, if you understand the science behind hoops, you understand why farmers use them.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think some people just don't like the way they look, and I think, okay, there's a lot of things in agriculture that are subjective in terms of their beauty, but I think to me that looks like production for food and medicine, so I like it.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with hoops. I mean, at least the aesthetics of it, the sight of them.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the farmer's got to grow, and it helps them use less pesticides and less water, and protects their crops. So I think all those things are hugely important in the agricultural community.
Hey, so those vocal voices that are pushing against cannabis, what is it that they're confusing between illegal and legal cannabis that you've seen?
One of the things that seems to get thrown about a lot is that that we're existing without any regulation, and that is the farthest thing on the planet from the truth. So, and I think I can understand their fear if they think that we're just sort of willy-nilly showing up and not having any regulation, either county or statewide, but that's just emphatically untrue. So I hear that a lot, that some of our elected officials have just allowed us to, run free with over-the-counter permitting, which is just, again, absolutely untrue. We've experienced statewide the most stringent regulatory requirements. So operators that are operating legally are under the gun in a tremendous way from the state perspective, having to go through state water board, fish and wildlife, it's just a staggering amount of regulatory information. Our farm had to have, reports from hydrologists to archaeologists to, biologists. We had multiple different, scientists out here making sure that we were protecting all of the land's natural resources, any cultural resources. We're only allowed to draw water from certain areas. That's all at the state and regional level. And then locally, the county has actually put forth an incredibly complicated and stringent program, designed to protect the community and to ensure that we are operating in symphony with the community. And I think that that's something that's widely misunderstood. And I think the county has been really unfairly vilified for, I keep seeing that Santa Barbara County is being seen as permissive. And I think that that's certainly not been my experience at all. That I think that they're operating a very, very strict system that's extremely hard to navigate. And they're doing it, and they're under attack too. I think as challenging as this has been for us cannabis farmers, the county has been under attack for crafting what is considered really the model in the state for how it should work. I think the challenge is that these NIMBYs or the few noisy opponents are not allowing the county to let the process they've put in place play out. And so therefore we're stuck in this quagmire where they're confusing, not yet licensed people, not yet permitted people, bad actors with the good actors, because there are so few good actors that have been able to get through this very, very complicated system. And so they're very hard to recognize or even see. And I think one of the things that's been challenging is because it's been so slow and arduous, there's a lot of bad actors that are continuing to operate, and the county has no mechanism for shutting, for controlling their activities or behaviors. So, and as a result, the people that don't like cannabis are pointing a finger at those people and saying that's the evidence that the ordinance is poorly crafted. And I think that that's, again, bad information. You can't point to a bank robber and be like, look, the banking system doesn't work. It's like, no, that guy broke the system. He's outside of the system. He's not the guy that your new laws are going to help, So I think that that's been really challenging, is to watch them continue want to change and further restrict the people that are operating within the letter of the law in order to create people that are not adhering to the law, in order to control those people. And it doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what's happening.
Yeah, it seems like, I mean, for if anybody's, I mean, seriously going around saying that legal cannabis operations just show up, and they get everything handed to them, I don't think they really understand the amount of regulation and then the amount of cost coupled with that it takes to actually get a legal cultivation or legal cannabis business just going in the county.
No, they don't. And again, I think that's that bad information that we'll continue to talk about. I think they really think that it's sort of like going to the drugstore, buying a pack of chewing gum. Like, oh, I just got a cannabis license, and obviously that's extraordinarily untrue.
Yeah, and I want to talk about regulations, or at least what seems to be some absurdities in the regulations. Not so much. Now, I'm not saying that regulations are bad, because I'm a huge supporter of a well-regulated cannabis market.
Sure.
It helps both me as a consumer. It helps, fill the coffers. It's just a good idea.
Yeah,
With
absolutely.
that said, it seems like, and I'm speaking from the outside, I'm not, I don't have any kind of cannabis license or anyways, but it seems like the state, as soon as 2016 came around and it became recreationally legal, the state wanted to reinvent the wheel as far as regulation, when it just seems like they already had a matrix, a structure.
But they didn't. I think that the medical structure was still extremely unregulated. And I as a someone who uses cannabis, as my medicine and therapy, I suffered from unregulated cannabis and in the medical market. And so I'm and I sit in a unique position, having gone through, of course, having a collective, as early as 2015, and now having legal cannabis cultivation, under the new, with provisional licenses, and working on our annuals, once we get through our county process. And I think a lot of the regulations that have been put in place have been helpful and are absolutely there to protect consumers. I think that they maybe have gone a little bit too far, but that those systems were not in place at all in many cases. So some of that regulation, I do think, is a necessary tool in order to protect consumers. And I think when you're operating in a state as big as this and a market as big as this, it's not going to be perfect. And especially when the market was well established without any rules at all. Do I think that the state went too far in quite a few of the things that were included in the regulation? Absolutely. And I think that we're learning how to make those amendments. And I think a lot of those challenges are putting a stranglehold on the industry. And I think, my perspective is, as a cultivator, I don't know very much about what is experienced on the retail level or on the manufacturing side or on the distribution side, other than I interface with those businesses. But I do think that as a cultivator, what I understand is, like, we actually have it easiest, which is terrifying because it isn't easy. But I got to say again, the state's requirements have been a birthday present compared to the local ones. So, and I've heard that from a lot of the different jurisdictions in the state. So it is somewhat of a clusterfuck, but there is a lot of good stuff that's happening there. And I think the biggest challenge is the way that they've assigned the taxes, have made it so financially prohibitive for anyone to continue to operate. And that has to be revised. And I know that the state is looking at revising that. And there's a lot of appetite for making sure that we don't have this whole system collapse. But the taxation that's happening at the state level, being based on a flat rate, doesn't make sense in a capitalist society. I mean, market conditions are not flat. So to tax on a flat rate feels and continues to be the thing that is crippling on the cultivation side, especially when a lot of the local jurisdictions are then adding their own onerous taxes on top. And, for us last year, if I were to look at the price we got per pound, we paid more in taxes than the farm actually was able to market per pound. I mean, that's over like 120% of our price was paid in taxes.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't make any sense for anybody, and we, the way that the system works is, the taxation that the farms pay is considered somewhat of a pass-through expense. It's not really. I mean, our distributors collect tax money from the farms, but we do pay, yeah, it's probably 60-70% of the dollar amount of the price per pound goes to the state of California and then to the county of Santa Barbara.
Hey, can you explain a little bit? Just take a little time to explain like that tax setup for the state and for
Well, the state basically assigned flat dollar amounts that you pay per gram or ounce of cannabis. So, and they based that on pricing that was sort of floating around back probably in 2014 or 15 when they started to craft all of this legislation. So they thought they were, they kind of came up with a conservative average, I believe, in their minds that everybody was earning, $2,000 a pound. And if they were earning $2,000 a pound, then the money that they assigned, the price per ounce that you had to pay taxes, didn't seem so usurious. Well, the problem is, that also assumed that everybody was selling sort of trimmed flower and had extra money they were making on trim and extra money this. But, on our farm, for example, we only sell for concentrates, and we sell all fresh material and all, mostly fresh frozen material. And we're an outdoor farm and we're higher volume, and our prices are significantly lower than what you could get for trimmed flower. We sell for concentrates. People can't afford to buy 100 pounds of cannabis to make a liter of concentrate and then turn it into pens and stuff for, the equivalent of what it would need to be, if I was making $1,000 or $2,000 a pound of trimmed flower. We're not making anywhere near that, but we're still paying a tax rate as if we are.
Right. I mean, that seems like an odd number, because if they pull that number out of the black market. I don't know, how did they?
Yeah, for sure. Of course they had to,
because
there was no other market.
Even in 2016, I mean, I don't think I don't know, was a medical pound going for $2,000?
I think it depended. Yeah. I mean, I would say probably 1,000, but even if they based it on 1,000. So for example, we sell, we don't sell dried material, but if we did, a dried pound of biomass in 2019, was, if you had really, really beautiful product, they yielded high, and you're going to concentrates, you'd get between $150 and $200 a pound maximum.
What?
But you'd pay the state $148 a pound in taxes. And then you'd pay the county of Santa Barbara 4% on $248. Like on those two numbers combined. So in Santa Barbara, we pay 4% gross taxes, but our gross receipts, and that includes the tax we pay to the state of California.
Wait, so
that effectively makes us paying 8% taxes, not 4 in this case.
It sounds like you're paying your taxes twice.
We are.
Wow. No, that can't be sustainable. How do they?
Well, it's certainly not. And other jurisdictions actually have more challenging tax, tax structures. A lot of people left Salinas and Monterey because they did it at a flat square per square footage, and that became impossible. I mean, you're paying really high taxes on walkways and places where people park people's cars. And,
wow. Holy cow.
Yeah, on money. So, I mean, certainly paying on an actual product that you're selling makes more sense. So I'm grateful to Santa Barbara for that. But yeah, because we're paying gross receipts, we don't get the normal deductions that anybody gets. And of course, because we're still not federally legal, we operate under 280E, which means we have no deductions that we can take on the federal level. So we can't deduct our state taxes from our federal income tax requirement. We still pay federal income tax, even though we're illegal.
Yeah, that 280E is a horrible tax code. It especially for the legal market in any state. That 280E it's a kick in the ass.
It's a nightmare. I mean, at least as cultivators, we can take our cost of goods sold as a deduction, but they're very, very, very strict on what they believe COGS to be. So we have to be very careful when we submit, and very little is truly acceptable to the government. So again, those are the things I think that are providing the largest challenges for those of us operating in the legal space and being strictly legal. I mean, we are absolutely, maniacal about maintaining our compliant status, with the county, with the state, with all of these tax requirements. And it's extraordinarily expensive, and it's disheartening, But then when you hear people say oh, it's just so easy, you're just going to pop up all over the place and there's going to be a cannabis farm on every corner. I'm like, well, not a legal one. You know?
Well, it's not just that. It's also the fact that everybody still has this Hollywood idea of how much money the legal cannabis market is making. It's not like the black
So
market.
actually, I'm really glad to hear you say that, Alex. You're absolutely right. I actually read an article yesterday, and it was a wonderful article, and it was an interview with a gentleman from the Ag Commission up in Sonoma, and I really appreciated his perspective. And actually, our Ag Commissioner here, who also spoke at the economic forum that I attended in North County last week, they both quoted, and I don't know where they got the statistics because it's so unfortunately extremely inaccurate. They both quoted that a cannabis farmer can make upwards of $5 to $6 million an acre. And I was sitting with another friend of mine in the legal market who's a colleague and a dear friend here who's a very talented farmer himself, actually with two other farmers, and our eyes popped. We were like, we've never seen that kind of money, even in the black market. I don't know where they extrapolated that.
I don't think you can make.
That is just absolutely
I mean,
patently false.
yeah, I don't think you can make that illegally in the black market here in California.
I don't know. Thankfully,
Because...
I don't know what the pricing is, but yes, it doesn't seem possible. And certainly then when you add to that we don't have the margins that they think that we have. Yeah, but it also, to your point, it promotes this idea that sort of we're these greedy outsiders that are just coming in and pillaging these landscapes. And that's just couldn't be farther from the truth. You know, my husband and I, we're an independent family farm. We live on our farm. It's our home. You know, we employ other local people and, you know, and this is our forever place, you know, and we don't have that kind of margin. We build all our own fences and, you know, we work 7 days a week, 18 hours a day during grow season. So, you know, I don't know who those people are that are making that kind of money, but I agree. I think they're only in Hollywood.
Yeah, I think it's only in movies because, I mean, unless you're taking it to a state that, you know, still doesn't have any kind of cannabis, whether medical or rec, even then, man, it's...
But, you know, and with the states that don't have the population to support, you know, a whole lot of growth. So it's, you know, it isn't perfect yet. We're working out a lot of the kinks. You know, I do think that our climate here and the will certainly, I mean, I hope Santa Barbara retains its will to support the well-crafted ordinance they have put in place. And I hope that they allow us to continue to work through the process to become fully legal for all of the good actors. And I hope that, you know, the rest of the state sort of takes notice of that because, you know, there's a certain amount of agricultural wisdom that we have here that I think is really helping and was intelligently baked into the Santa Barbara ordinance and is necessary throughout the rest of the state. And because I just think you need those economies of scale in order to survive, just like you do with any other agricultural endeavor.
That's right, what you said. You do need them to scale because, I mean, without that market, it's nothing's going to survive. I mean, nothing legal. It's not going to be the way the politicians imagined it or even sold it to us.
No, but I have to say, like, one of the other things we haven't touched on yet is, and it's, I think, a bigger problem, you know, is the local jurisdictions need to allow people to have dispensaries. You know, I mean, can you imagine if you weren't allowed to buy beer anywhere in 80% of the state, you know, the counties in California?
Yeah, and once again, that's something, and I've spoken about this before on the show, is what I'd like people to understand is that, yes, the right to grow your own cannabis and have cannabis, yes, we do have that as citizens of California, but there are cannabis deserts, which means that, like you said, 60-80% of the communities, of the counties, of the municipalities don't allow any kind of legal cannabis in their area, which means there's no dispensaries, no cultivating. So while me as a citizen... That
means the black market flourishes.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny, I was having a conversation with an attorney who does a lot of work in Bakersfield, and she said she'd recently been over there and she was speaking to the sheriff. And I may get the numbers wrong, but she said the sheriff told her that he had something like 1,400 or 1,500 known illegal grows, but because they didn't have any legal cannabis and no tax revenue from it, they had no mechanism to shut them down.
What?
They had no tax dollars. You know what I mean? It wasn't as big a priority as violent crime. It's really, you know, and I'm sure they were of all sizes. You know, I'm sure that some of them weren't the size of my farm, but there was an enormous amount of illegal activity that law enforcement knew about and didn't have the budget to shut them down. And, you know, and that was simply because they had no tax revenue coming in from any legal entity to ensure compliance. You know, as uncomfortable as it is, we're so grateful to law enforcement and that we've got the budget and we actually have a surplus to feed that budget to allow the enforcement activity that's happening here in Santa Barbara to keep the black market from flourishing. That's a benefit to all legal growers, but that needs to happen statewide. And in order to do that, we need to have counties give their law enforcement the tools and the resources necessary to shut those folks down. But in order to do that, they need revenue from legally operating folks.
I never thought of it in those aspects. You're totally right. If there's no money coming in to enforce those laws,
yep,
from a legal industry,
yep,
then how do you get the budget to enforce it? Because it's like I wanted to finish saying was that since so many municipalities don't allow legal cannabis, that means me as a citizen, even though I can legally obtain it and smoke it and carry it with me, I have no place legally to get it. So the black market is there to fill that void.
Exactly.
Not only are they there to fill that void because there's no other game in town because it's a cannabis desert. I want to get my medicine from somewhere. So, okay, here's this guy. He's going to fill that void.
Absolutely. And that medicine isn't going to be regulated and isn't going to have testing done, and you're not going to know where it came from, and it might not be dosed properly, and all of those other challenges that we all faced prior to legalization, and that's dangerous for a lot of reasons.
It also goes into this other conversation where on the other side, people who don't understand the issue are wondering, well, where's all these streets of gold that cannabis was supposed to pave in California?
Yeah.
And I tell them, I was like, well, it's kind of hard when only 40 to 20% of municipalities are actually in the system and paying into that. Because every year when the state budget comes up, you always hear like, oh, well, cannabis didn't bring in as much as people, thought it was going to bring in. And I'm like, but that's because it isn't legal everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's exactly, as a user, it's legal. You're not going to go to jail for smoking a joint anymore, but it's very hard to find a jurisdiction where you can legally grow.
Yeah,
really hard.
And then all of that money that's going into the black market could be filling those local coffers.
100%. I mean, I heard, the black market is something like 4 or 5 times that of the legal market in California right now.
Yeah, I think so.
All that money should be in the legal market.
It really should.
Nobody talks about like black market vodka. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because if there is, it's a very small market. And
I don't think there is. I think that because it's sort of perceived as, appropriate and kosher, and everybody's used to it, it exists everywhere, even though we have, ABC and the BCC, I guess, well, they're not cannabis control, but, Lori Ajax certainly ran the alcohol, board and regulation, and, that is highly regulated too. And people that operate in the alcohol industry work very, very hard to be regulated, but it's allowed everywhere.
Yeah, and that's my hope is I'd just like cannabis to be regulated the exact same way as alcohol. I don't want special treatment aside from alcohol because, both things in the end, they're both drugs or both a vice. One of them's more medicine than the other.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging, like I'm not a real rec person. I mean, I really use cannabis for me, truly for medicine, but I do recognize that it is, entertainment and recreation for a lot of folks. And I agree that that should be absolutely, I mean, it is permissible, it is allowed, it is legal now. And I think that's fine. And there's a lot less danger there than there are with some of the other recreational things that we allow in every jurisdiction in the state. So it's interesting to me just that we have this prohibition hangover that's so pernicious, that so many people are so effectively in so many communities throughout California keeping it out. And my observation is, as I see what's happening here in Santa Barbara with the few noisy NIMBYs that we're dealing with, is that that's being played out across the state. And it doesn't represent the electorate at all. It represents a few powerful people. And I think that that's very disappointing because we're seeing that kind of writ large in this country right now.
With all this talk that we're having about just the high cost of regulation and all these barriers of entry into a legal market, it's not really surprising to me when I hear of legal growers who get caught with some kind of illegal, whether they're doing illegal extraction or They're
Yeah,
skimming
I get
product off
that.
into the
That
black
troubles me
market
though.
because,
No, I
I
know. I
mean,
had an argument with somebody about that just 2 days ago.
you know, I'm not
Um,
I'm not supportive of it, but I can
no, I hear you.
understand.
But you can see how it happens,
Yeah, I
and
can
I
understand
understand that too.
completely.
But I have to be like aggressively unsupportive of it. Like I have
Well, of
to,
course.
as much as I understand and can sympathize with how that happened, it makes my job and the job of my colleagues who are doing everything right so much harder to hear that somebody's been selling out the front door, and taking interviews and doing the right thing, and then just a little bit extra out the back door to make ends meet. That's, first of all, it paints like a false picture that we're all profitable enough. We're being held to such a higher standard. And maybe this is because I've been a woman doing business as an independent entrepreneur my whole career. And I understand about you have to be better, faster, stronger, smarter, work harder, tighter, more perfect to be perceived as equal. And in this case, we are so under a microscope. I hate hearing people are dabbling in both markets. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, because when the headline hits, it's always a black eye. And then,
Yeah.
we all start to defend the industry. So like, no, look, that's just, those are just those people. That's not
Yeah.
everybody. And
But and when they look like they have a foot in both worlds, it makes it look like we all might have a foot in
right, it
both
makes it
worlds.
look
And that
like, well,
undermines all of the hard work that we've spent so much time in the last 5 years sort of putting in. And, but on the flip side of that is like, you don't know who's really doing that, who's been falsely accused of doing that, what's happening. But I do, certainly there are people that are doing it. Um, and I just absolutely do not I'm so anti. I don't even want to have a conversation. I had a woman mention to me the other day that she knew some people, and I was like, I don't want to know, and you need to get the hell out of here. I just don't find it excusable.
sure.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, I can understand that.
but I do understand how hard and expensive it is to continue to operate, and to continue to work through the ever-changing landscape of the legal compliance. But I think that we simply cannot afford to do anything but perfect.
Are you doing any kind of public education at your farm? I mean, do you have tours
We did a
or?
couple of private events this year around harvest time that I was really, really excited about. Reaching out to the community to share with them our processes. So, we don't have an event license. So, I can have some private events where I invite people from the community, and we want to be real careful about making sure we are operating again within the rules that the county allow for us. So we did have a couple of private events that were geared absolutely at education. And we also have, I don't know if you know, myself and fellow farmer and business owner John DeFriel have founded Good Farmers, Great Neighbors, and the North County Farmers Guild. So the North County Farmers Guild is an advocacy group. It's a not-for-profit, and our campaign, that's been our educational campaign, has been Good Farmers, Great Neighbors. So we've been putting out some educational videos, and we're continuing to do work and advocacy on education. And yes, we have been doing some personal tours, and we tour people whenever possible in order to help them understand the reality of what we're experiencing here in Santa Barbara, and also the reality of like outdoor growing. Our practices are very different from an indoor grow, and I respect the hell out of those indoor guys. It's just a different application of our agricultural trade.
Yeah, in indoors a little different for sure. I
Oh yeah.
mean,
I
just
think everything has its pluses and minuses, so, but we're very much an outdoor row crop farm. We are, sun grown emphatically. We live and die by the weather. Um, and I like that. It feels very farm to table in a good way. I feel a lot of community and kinship with fellow farmers that aren't necessarily cannabis farmers. And for
hey,
us, it feels right. And I think we're in this unique place in the world in Santa Barbara County where, we have this unique Mediterranean style climate, and it's just perfect for cannabis. And I think if and when we go federally legal, and we all know it's coming, or even if we can just, the States Act comes through and we can do interstate commerce with other legal states, I think the value of this community and this weather and this environment is going to be, I think, really important as we try to maintain existence. I think California grown, sun grown, Santa Barbara grown is all going to be extremely valued because it is such a unique and special climate to create beautiful, beautiful cannabis.
Yeah, for sure. It should be on the label, sun grown in Santa Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Absolutely. So I love the work that people are doing to try to create appellations for cannabis. I think there's a lot of value to that. And, that's definitely got to be an outdoor environment. It doesn't make sense if you're in a warehouse. I respect the hell out of people that are growing that way, but it seems like if you have a climate controlled environment, then you can control it in more places. Then the sense of place is less valuable than the skill and the science of the grower in those buildings.
yeah.
And my husband, who's the real grower on the farm, and he's got his hands in the dirt all day, every day. And he says best is like nothing. You can't recreate the sun. You can do a facsimile of it, but you can't recreate the nuance and all of the glory that the sun imparts to all plants.
And it's not even the sun; it's all of Mother Nature. The breeze, the fluctuations in temperature from daytime to nighttime.
And it's just naturally well cared for soil is a really big deal. And again, I know indoor guys absolutely care for their soil and they do all those things. I'm not speaking against them. There's something so magical about this outdoor environment, and I think it does make the plants just seem happier. I mean, who doesn't want to be standing in a beautiful field in northern Santa Barbara County?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Soaking up the sun.
But for me personally, I have grown indoors. It's not my preferred way to grow. I just don't have that kind of time. It's just the minutia of the detail that's on me is I don't have that kind of time, man. Fuck, put them outside.
Yeah, I understand. Again, I feel as if we bring in a lot of data when we're farming. We do an enormous amount of data analysis, and we do tissue samples and soil samples and water moisture samples, and we look at potassium levels and all the things that influence the way that we're farming. So time isn't something I think any farmer really has excess. We're working 24/7 with all of those inputs. But again, I feel like we just have a little bit of extra help from being out under the big blue sky with like the natural wind that we get here in northern Santa Barbara County. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
I imagine indoor guys work really, really hard. Just the outdoor guys work really, really hard.
Oh, they do.
Too.
Oh, no, indoor guys,
yeah.
Not taking anything away from those guys. But me personally, I can't do it. I mean, I'd prefer not to. Let's put it that way. I can do it. I just prefer not to.
Fair enough.
Hey, Sarah, I wanted to ask you something. So I've heard, and we've talked about this last time, but I've heard some really wicked horror stories between like wine producers, between vintners and cannabis producers. The reason I brought that up is because I know you're like deep in wine country out there, up in the North County. Are attitudes with your vintner neighbors, with your wine producing neighbors, are they pretty good about it?
So I think it's the same as the rest of the electorate. I think there's a couple that are noisy NIMBYs that are very, very anti. The vast majority of the people that I've experienced, that I've had the interface with, are sane, rational cultivators who have voiced some concerns. And traditionally, when they're met with science and good neighborly, productive relationships, they've been really positive. I mentioned that I had a couple of private events, lunches with some people at my farm, and at those events we had four or five vintners and winemakers at one of those events, and they were all extremely positive. So my experience hasn't been that vintners and winemakers writ large are anti-cannabis, but just like people in Carpinteria aren't anti-cannabis, but there's a few that are, and I think there's a few vintners that are, and there's a few that once they got better information or were given tours or came to understand how we operate and what's really happening, those fears were assuaged. And there's one or two that just are super anti, and nobody's mind is going to be changed, and they're working very hard and to have us not be here. And that's disappointing because we have a legal right to be here, and we're working really hard to enhance our community rather than to diminish it. And that is disappointing, but it's America, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion. So we work hard to ensure that they're not able to remove our rights and our home and our businesses.
Yeah, for sure. That's true.
I just don't give any credence to like wine versus weed. I think that's just a terrible fallacy. I think it's a couple noisy people who would like to make that story a big story. And my experience with winemakers has been one of fellow farmers being curious, supportive, and equally frustrated that some of the members of their community have been spreading things that aren't truthful. That sort of like I was upset a moment ago about, cannabis growers sort of selling some out the front door and some out the back. I think most of the winemakers I've spoken to are sort of upset that they're being painted as sort of anti when they're absolutely not. And they're being asked to take positions that they're not comfortable with by some of these noisy NIMBYs.
Oh, I got you.
So,
I got you.
you
So,
know, the angry voices are always the loudest and the most memorable, and they usually get the most press.
well, yeah, it's that squeaky wheel thing, right?
Yeah, it's also like, the same reason reality TV doesn't have anything to do with reality. They always ask for conflict. So the people with conflict get the most coverage, which gives them a disproportionately large image that doesn't really represent the truth of, again, the electorate. Most people who are working really hard trying to survive and farm and make their wine or broccoli or cauliflower or whatever they're doing in this county don't have time to be writing angry letters and showing up at meetings and flinging mud about at other farmers. They're busy just trying to survive like the rest of us. And those people, unfortunately, aren't heard as much as the people that are,
Who have the time?
idle and angry.
Who have the time to be angry?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Hey, Sarah. So I want to change gears with you a little bit here, and because I want to talk about your farm.
Okay.
So, tell me again, what's the name of your farm?
So the farm name is Busy Bees Organics. And that's our licensed entity, and that is the farm name. And our brand name, which is what you referenced earlier, is Well Founded. So we were Bluebird, but unfortunately we had a trademark issue, so we're changing to Well Founded, which I'm okay with because honestly, it's probably more indicative of the brand. We're founded in wellness, and the whole concept of the products that we produce are, based on the things that have been healing for me and my experience and my journey. And we always say at the farm, we're all about sort of wellness for people, plant, and planet. And so that's the sort of concept that's going into our products. And so, but that's consumer facing, and
So
Busy Bees is really the farm itself.
So then, the Busy Bee Organics, is that the name of the product line?
No, the product line is Well Founded Botanicals.
Okay. Oh, I see. Well, all right. I'm gonna write
Yeah.
that down
So
below.
Busy Bees Organics is the farm,
Botanical.
and the farm, that's our cannabis licensed entity, and we sell wholesale to other like-minded brands, and then we'll, sort of license to license sell, within our own brand, and our brand consumer facing is Well Founded Botanicals.
Got you. So now you said you're sun grown, which means you're outdoors. There's no greenhouse. It's
That's correct.
far out, far out. So now, are you guys are those plants in pots or in the ground?
No, they're right in the ground. We grow just like row crops. So we are in the ground. Somebody once called them like little Christmas trees.
But in order for you to grow in ground, you had to have that soil tested organic for 3 years. Is that right?
Yes, but when we first got the farm and we purchased the farm in 2014, we immediately cultivated the entire farm for organic production. So we went fallow. We worked the soil, we amended everything. We actually I'm really obsessed with Joel Salatin. So we did a lot of regenerative farming and got a lot of chickens and goats and, try to plant cover crops and worked all of the farmland, all of the farmable land on this property immediately to be able to do organic production. So we had enough foresight a long time ago to begin that process. And we did continue to test the soil. And heal the soil. When we purchased the farm, it was not in such great shape. It had been sort of leased out to a few different farmers who were, they certainly weren't organic, and they weren't as careful with the soil as we'd like to be. And so we spent quite a lot of time and effort and energy healing the soil, and we planted over 4,000 trees around the perimeter to sort of protect sort of our biodiversity, but also to create a screen around the farm, which turns out also is a really good, somewhat of an odor abatement, honestly, issue, because we have a really thick screen around the whole farm now, and it sort of deflects any potential odors during the few days a year when we actually have odor producing opportunity, like during harvest. And it also helps mitigate a little bit of any accidental drift that may happen. It's like a windscreen. So you see those all over Salinas. And so we have quite a lot of trees, and we're happy for a little bit of extra carbon capture. So we love our trees. And so that's been a big deal for us. But yeah, we grow right in the dirt.
Hey, so do you do any kind of companion planting, like some clover for nitrogen, or?
No, we do that. Yeah, we do a cover crop in the off season. So right now we have a mix of legumes and different grasses, and it's like a fetch mix that's in the ground now that'll be turned in a couple of weeks when we start bedding up.
So on a farm,
but no companion planting. No, we just do straight furrows.
Okay. So then, what kind of IPM do you run on a sun-grown farm? Is it all just
we use a lot of
predators?
beneficial insects?
Okay.
So, and then we also give our plants sort of support with biologicals in their feed. So we try to do as little spraying. Obviously, there's not very many opportunities that we have in terms of what's allowed. So we do the majority of our work with beneficial insects. And there's a few organic materials that we are able to utilize if pressure gets hard. But you're a grower. Prevention is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So we try to work real hard on early plant health. And also we grow from seed, which, gives a much healthier plant. They have their taproot and they just have a lot more resiliency. And we've seen that play out last year. All our seed plants just thrived. They were so happy. We had very, very light pest pressure year, which was a mercy.
Well, no, that is a mercy if you got light pest pressures, man.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you don't want to.
But you stay on top of it. I mean, obviously, you don't let it. Somebody once said to me, and again, I knew Nate would be a better person to talk to, but by the time you see it, you're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're seeing signs,
try to keep from ever having to see it.
If you're seeing signs,
a lot of proactive planning and scheduling to make sure that you never see those pests, and it's working well for us.
Well, and here's another thing, and here's one thing that some people don't understand about using biological predators, is that in order for them to thrive and stick around, there still has to be a little bit of a pest.
Oh yeah,
because
for sure.
Yeah, I talk to people.
Ladybugs got to eat something.
Yeah,
otherwise they won't stay. So, but that's creating balance, right? This year, I remember I was kind of thrilled. We had a natural ladybug population arrive, which meant we had just the right amount of mites for ladybugs to stay. But the ladybugs stayed and kept the mites from creating a problem for our plants.
Yeah, it just keeps them in check. Yeah, because a lot of people, especially when they're growing outdoors, they want like total eradication. I'm like, first of all, you're outdoors. You're not going to get it.
No, it's not possible. Yeah.
That's if you want that, go inside. That's
for sure.
Basically.
Yeah, no, it's true. And, not everything is as pretty as you might want it to be, but it ends up being pretty. I mean, that's what those leaves are there for. They're there to, make food through photosynthesis, and they protect the flower a little bit. So, but yeah, no, you'll see ladybugs on our farm. I love it when people come through and they're actually growers and they're like, oh, so happy to see some bugs on your plants, but the good bugs. And the good bugs are there eating the bad bugs. And, it's kind of beautiful. Plus, ladybugs are super cheerful, so I always like to see them.
So in this past year, like CBD and hemp is like taking over the headlines, man. It's everywhere. Everybody wants to put it in everything. Is any part of your farm, are you growing hemp?
No, we've talked about it. Last year we didn't do any. We've talked about doing a little bit, and we have an MOU with Alan Hancock to do a small amount of research on hemp, and we're looking at it, and we'd like to consider it for some other property that we're expanding into, but where we don't have cannabis licenses, so that'd be all we'd be allowed to do. And for me, CBD's been a large part of my therapy, but I move into that cautiously. I think, a lot of people jumped on it. I think one thing that happened that was really beneficial for us this year is we really solidified our sweet spot. We do fresh material and fresh frozen material. We've been doing that for 5 years. That's become our niche. We're good at it. We're very comfortable with it. There's just so much CBD in the market, so that's a whole other market right now. We're really focused on our cannabis, and we grow enough plants that have CBD in it. So for our well-founded botanicals line, we're going to do like a 1-to-1 tincture, a 10-to-1, and a 20-to-1. So I like high CBD, but we'll grow genetics that are closer to those ratios, and then, or we have some other material that we have to sort of get to those ratios being exact. So we need to grow a little bit of CBD for that. but we're going to do it sort of with cannabis plants. I mean, cannabis and hemp is the same, but I'm not trying to get into the hemp market this year. Like I said, we're going to do a little research and sort of see what makes sense within our line, but we're kind of taking a wait and see approach. I understand from a lot of my agriculturalist friends who've jumped in that market's already sort of collapsing because of the overproduction that's just going to still be in the pipeline all of 2020.
Yeah, there is a lot of hemp biomass out there. This past year, that price really took a dive.
Sure.
But you said
I
something.
I think California and Santa Barbara will be a good place for it because we'll grow it well, and I've seen some of the stuff, just because the climate favors it, and I think it will start to shake out. But man, I gotta pick my lane, and I pick the lane of cannabis.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. You said something. You're not allowed to grow hemp on your land where you have a permit for cannabis?
No, you just in Santa Barbara County, you need to be affiliated with a research institute in order to grow hemp. It's not, the county hasn't put a hemp ordinance in yet. It's undetermined. So the only way you can legally grow hemp in Santa Barbara County is vis-a-vis scientific research.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, at the moment. So we have that. And we are going to do probably a couple of acres this year, again, so we can get smarter about the plant and the genetics, because we do use that in our product line. But right now we're doing R&D.
Hey, Sarah, so that's the end of my notes, buddy. Those are all my questions.
All right. Well, it's been delightful talking to you again, Alex. I sure do appreciate your time.
Oh, I appreciate you getting on the phone as well, man. Thank you for breaking off a piece of time for me to get on the show.
My pleasure. Hey, can I do one shout out for all of the cannabis concerned citizens of Santa Barbara County? And I'm sorry I have to do this, but we have our hearing on March 17th in Santa Maria. Anyone that feels comfortable or wants to see, good, legally compliant cannabis farmers continue to survive, that they feel comfortable writing a letter in support of Busy Bees or any farmer that's actually paying attention and living by the laws that Santa Barbara put in place, we'd be so grateful. We have been appealed by one of those NIMBYs, and our life is kind of on the line about it. I mean, we feel good about going in to the hearing, but the more support we can get from our fellow neighbors, the better it is for us. So if people are so inspired and would feel comfortable supporting us by writing a letter to their supervisor, just saying they support Busy Bees Organics in their project, that would be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. That is.
You could cut all of that out if you want.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, I'm going to leave all that in because everybody needs to get involved. I think, everybody needs to get involved. And absolutely, come out March 17th in support of cannabis.
Just write a letter to your supervisor. I know it's a lot to ask people to come for the day, but if you could write a letter to, you find it on the Santa Barbara, County of Santa Barbara website, find out who's your supervisor and let them know that you're a Santa Barbara voter and that you want Busy Bees Organics to be successful here in Santa Barbara because they are legally compliant, and you want to have access to locally grown, legally compliant, safe cannabis. And that would be great.
Yeah, get involved, everybody.
That's right. Yeah, and get involved, because no matter what, if you don't get involved, they will take your rights back away.
Well, if we don't get involved, they're going to make decisions about cannabis without us.
That's exactly what, and that's what's been happening.
Yeah. So we got to stay involved.
So we're in it, trying to stay front and center and do the right thing. And so, like I said, we have our hearing, and it's do or die for us. We feel really good about it, but we could always use more support from concerned cannabis connoisseurs.
Absolutely. Sarah, one more thing. Can you tell everybody where they can find Busy Bee Organics and Well-Founded Botanicals?
Well, so Busy Bees Organics is we sell exclusively wholesale, so we can't do any direct-to-consumer. So you'll find us and our products in some of your favorite brands. We work with some of the largest cannabis companies in the state of California. So everywhere from, Great Pens to topicals and whatnot. But we'll be hopefully launching Well-Founded Botanicals, which will be our stuff, around April of this year, and I definitely hope we'll be in all of our local dispensaries.
Well, definitely let me know, and I'll let everybody else know.
Sweet. Definitely. Yeah, I would love to. I will for sure let you know once we drop. I'm very excited about it.
Far out. Okay, Sarah, do me a favor. Don't hang up.
Okay.
Everybody else, I'm going to play a little bit of music, and then I'll be right back. So yeah, trip out, huh? 4 years after, legalized recreational adult use cannabis got passed, it still isn't easy to be part of the legal market out here in cannabis. Again, I want to thank Sara for taking the time to be on the show and help keeping us informed of what's going on out there in the cultivation scene, in the legal cultivation scene here in California. Now, don't forget, everybody, if you have a question or a comment about this episode, send me an email. That is inmygrow@gmail.com. Or you can find me on social media. That is the Cannabis app or Instagram @InMyGrowShow. Guess what, folks? That's it. That's all I have to share with you today. As always, if this show has educated you, entertained you, or even given you a little escape from your day, do me a favor. Why don't you help us out with a little financial donation? You can go over to patreon.com/inmygrow and leave a donation there for us. Or you can go over to inmygrow.com, click on the support the show tab and buy a t-shirt. And yet another way to support us financially is before you go shopping on Amazon, click on the Amazon link at the top of the show notes of this episode. That way they know that we sent you and the show gets a commission. Now, if you can't support the show financially, don't worry about it. I get it. But here's how you can help. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And then subscribe to the website, inmygrow.com. And then go over to YouTube, search for the In My Grow Show with Alex, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then after you do those 3 things, do something else. Tell 3 other people about the show. That's it. Really simple. Well, mis amigos, like I said, I'm going to get out of here. You know that I love you all very much. And remember to always grow, learn, and teach.